26th of September 2013, LA Capone, together with his good friend and fellow rapper JB Bin Laden, who LA shouted out in his debut single Work, where he raps, "Dare someone try me, I'll be with a shooter, yeah that's Lil JB." Now these two were together at a recording studio on South Stony Island Avenue in the South Shore neighborhood. Eerily, just months prior, Wooski from STLEBT, an enemy of 600, had previously tweeted at LA warning him to be careful when he's with JB. Footage would later circulate from the studio showing LA's last moments, recording a song that would later become the track Brothers, a blockbuster collab with LA, Rondo No. 9 and Lil Durk. But just before 7 PM, LA would end up exiting the studio from the rear, walking into an alleyway. Unbeknownst to him, waiting in that alleyway were two gunmen, who would open fire, hitting LA twice. LA Capone, real name Leonard Anderson, would be transported to the Northwestern Memorial Hospital in downtown Chicago, about half-hour drive from the studio, where he would ultimately be pronounced dead at 8:30 PM. Tay 600 would later recall on his YouTube channel getting a call that night about what had happened. Tay would apparently call Lil Durk, who would go on to post a get well message to LA on Twitter 56 minutes after the shooting, and Tay and Durk would apparently head to the hospital together, but unfortunately when they arrived, they would be met by a doctor covered in blood who informed them that LA had unfortunately not survived the shooting.
The doctors come out. It's two detectives and it's a doctor. And the doctor, had so much blood. I can't remember if it was a boy or a girl doctor, but the doctor had so much blood, like, on they, you know what I'm saying? Like, on they, like, they work. Like, I'm like, damn. Dirk tapping, he like, man, he like, more. They coming out like they finna say folks dead or something. They ass tweaking. Whole time they was finna tell us he ain't make it, you know what I'm saying? I'm not even thinking about it at this time, but they about to let us know folks never made it.
It would be later reported that LA had actually been just minutes away from the University of Chicago's Trauma Center for Youths, but he was denied treatment as he had just turned 17. In an interview with 16 Shot and Visuals, JB Bin Laden would give it extra insight into the day that LA was killed. It would seem that LA was truly at the cusp of superstardom, as he had been telling JB that he was supposed to be meeting with Atlanta legend T.I. very soon.
He kept telling me that he was supposed to be meeting T.I. So flying to Atlanta with Dirk and meeting T.I. and like that. This what he used to be telling me, like for around the time he telling me, like, man, I'm finna fly out, meet T.I. He was flying out at this point, like he had went on a couple shows with Dirk.
This would also be confirmed by LA's sister on an Instagram live with Tay Capone.
Somebody said Dirk would have signed LA. Let me just set the record straight on that too. My brother wasn't no dummy. That's why he ain't let him just sign him. He had a whole record deal before he died. He was finna sign with T.I. and them. He would have never signed with Dirk for $100,000. What the f is that, a car?
JB would also explain that witnessing LA's death was his first heartbreak and that he still suffers PTSD from it to this day.
That was like my real first like heartbreak. I was really up behind that. Like PTSD, that's where like that come from for me. Like, you know, that happened so fast when I was young, and it's like I said, my intuition was telling us not to go to the studio, so it's like we was wrong from the jump, you know what I'm saying? And it's like all that was eating me up, all type of like I couldn't even, you know what I'm saying?
600 members would be devastated by the loss of one of their most prominent and talented members. Rondo would pay tribute in an IG post and on Twitter. E-Day would tweet that LA's legacy would live forever, and many 600 members were seen wearing RIP LA Capone shirts in Rondo No. 9's new song Life of a Savage. Other people close to LA would also pay their respects, like Trey Savage from Chief Keef's Glow Gang, as well as Lil Durk himself, who along with Rondo would record a new verse for the song Brothers, the track LA was working on moments before his death, with that track releasing on Christmas 2013 as a tribute. According to police reports, LA's killing would at first seem like a hard case to solve, as there were no working security cameras and the area was mainly surrounded by abandoned buildings. There was also a few witnesses who had directly seen the events take place, other than LA's friend, who could only provide a limited description of the shooter's appearance. However, that didn't stop 600's many ops from dissing LA and celebrating in the aftermath of his death, including prominent rivals from STL like KI and FBG Duck, with guys like MOB Nut even implying that it was time for MOB to kill even more 600 members. Ultimately, little less than a year after LA's death, the detectives would suddenly have a breakthrough when a man known as Michael Mays, better known in the streets as 051 Rocco or Rockhead, would tell them that he had witnessed the killing firsthand and that he knew the perpetrators personally. This initial interview, where Mays would implicate another 051 member called Lil Mick, real name Saki Hardy Johnson, and a man named Mako Buchanan, would put into motion a series of tell-all interviews by Johnson, Buchanan, and Mays, where each person would try and outmaneuver the others. In a subsequent interview, Mays would allege that Johnson had later bragged about shooting LA Capone in the face when both shots had in fact been in the lower body. Johnson, on the other hand, alleged that Mays may have been involved in the killing of a female 051 member called Big A, real name Amanda Fitch, who had actually been with the trio at the time of the killing of LA Capone. Johnson would also claim that it was Mays who told him that LA Capone was at the studio making a diss song about him, and that he had initially refused to go with the others when they told about their plans to kill LA until somebody brought up 600 being responsible for the murder of Fathead. He would finish his recollection of the events by stating that the killer had been either Mays or Buchanan, but Johnson hadn't actually witnessed the shooting, as he had simply waited for the others in the car. Buchanan would apparently begin his interview cautious and apprehensive. However, a meal from McDonald's seemed to put him at ease, because Buchanan would then proceed to come up with not one, but two different scenarios about what had happened that night. In the first scenario, Buchanan claimed that he had heard rumors of the deceased woman named Fitch being responsible for the killing. However, it seems then that Buchanan may have later realized that this version of the events didn't seem believable to the detectives, as he would then come up with another version of the events where it was in fact Johnson who had pulled the trigger. But despite their efforts to cooperate, all three would eventually all be tied to and convicted of the murder. Johnson, aka Lil Mick, was indeed determined to have been the shooter, and he would receive the longest sentence with a total of 60 years. However, in 2021, he would get a partial legal victory, as it was deemed that he would get a resentencing, likely shorter than the original 60 years. Buchanan, meanwhile, would end up getting a total of 45 years. He would also appeal, but that was denied. And Mays, who was the first to offer detectives information about the murder, would get the lightest sentence, but still being hit with a whopping 24 years. And after the trio had been caught, Reddit users on Chiracology actually found social media posts of Johnson, aka Lil Mick, getting his dreads cut around the time of the murder. Apparently a common move in the aftermath of the shooting to get rid of any gunpowder residue out of the long hair and to change their image to throw off the police. Lil Mick could also be seen on Twitter the day after the murder, taunting 600 and LA Capone, and claiming that 600 needed a new name for their block, such as LA World, similar to other neighborhoods when a fallen member dies. Driller from 051, on the other hand, would tweet what LA's last words had supposedly been. No. Commenters on Reddit argued that it would have been very likely that the trio would have gotten away with the murder had it not been for Mays, aka Rocco's cooperation. Interestingly, before the arrest for the firearm in 2014, which led Rocco to cooperate, he was a top-ranking member from 051 and allegedly had been involved in 3 murders, being seen as 051's top killer at the time, as well as being noted as a top 10 shooter by the Chicago police, with commenters alleging that he may well have been the murderer of both LA Capone and OTF Newski, Dirk's cousin. Rocco had been taunting LA online the very next week, throwing up LA hand signs. He also posted a slew of disrespectful tweets regarding LA's murder. Interestingly, the online detectives on Reddit's Chiracology have also seemingly solved who made the original call, giving up LA's location and setting him up. This would allegedly be another rapper by the name of Hard Knock, who is affiliated with the 757 Gang Alliance in the low end, who on the other hand were at the time heavily affiliated with 051. According to this long and elaborate theory that appears very well sourced, Hard Knock was at the studio at the same time as LA and JB, and he would end up calling Rockhead to come to the studio to smoke some dope with them, which would in reality end up being a setup to kill LA. LA Capone's death was a huge loss, not only to 600, but to the whole drill scene. His music career had seemingly been on a steep rise in 2013, and many were expecting him to be the next big rap superstar to blow up from Chicago. LA Capone's rap career still had a massive impact on the world and left a big legacy to be remembered. New York drill legend Pop Smoke would tweet in 2014 that LA Capone was his favorite rapper, likely inspiring the future Brooklyn drill star to start rapping himself. In his short-lived career, LA Capone created many hit songs that would become classics in the Chicago drill scene, with 600 Breezy believing that at just age 17, LA would likely have been the biggest artist from Chicago if he remained alive. He even had his own connections with massive future stars such as G Herbo, as LA actually went to school with him, something that G Herbo later shared in a tribute post to LA on Instagram.
Hey, shout out Lil Herb too, I got some new coming soon too. Yeah. Featuring on Lil Herb, man. And
shout out Lil Herb, LMB, Lil Bibby, man.
Ultimately, the story of LA Capone went down as one of the most tragic wastes of talent in Chicago history. The aspiring rap rookie could truly have been one of the greats. but ultimately it was his ties to the streets of 600 that both inspired his music as well as inspired his enemies to take him out. And unfortunately for 600, L.A. Capone's murder was only the first of many disappointing setbacks.